So I am so excited about today's video. It is going to completely break down how to shadow smock any shape that your little heart desires. It's so exciting. And it's basically all about finding the rectangle, and I will get into what that means. So when you shadow smock, just a quick refresher or maybe a quick overview for those who don't know, when you shadow smock, let's take a rectangle for example. And what you do is you go along, at least what I do, is I go along the long sides of that rectangle. That's going to be key here in explaining this whole concept. You go along the long sides of that rectangle and you do one stitch, you go over to the other side, you do the other stitch, and it's basically a running stitch in reverse, like a backwards running stitch is what I do at least, and that's how I'm going to explain it to y'all. So with that in mind, what that looks like when you translate it to an animation is that, and I learned animation for y'all to do this video. I know it looks very kindergartenish, but just bear with me. So when you take that into animation form, you have your rectangle, and you're going to focus, like I said, on those long... Can I help you? You're going to focus, like I said, on those long sides of the rectangle, because that's what's going to give you the coverage of that shape. So that's going to give you, you go from one stitch to, across to the other side, to the other stitch, back and forth, until you have your rectangle that's all filled in. And now for those small, those shorter lengths, all you're going to do is do a backward stitch, and you just fill them in, and that's no big deal. You can kind of, it's no big deal. You can kind of even send, once you have the rectangle filled in, you can send your needle underneath those threads and try to keep your work nice and neat. And so you just fill in those little short things. So with that in mind, okay, we're doing the long side of the rectangle, and then you just fill in the short sides of that rectangle. So with that whole thinking in mind, let's break down a bunch of other shapes. First of all, let's start with a flower. With the petals of the flower, what you're going to see is that you can take the petals of that flower and they can kind of morph into each of their rectangles, right? Yeah, and so the short end of the petal, you might have to just do some back stitches just to fill in the outline, but the long sides of that petal are going to give you the coverage. And then when you are done with all of your petals, you're going to have the center of the flower to deal with. You're either going to be able to fill this in, depending on the look that you're going for, with a circle, or you can fill this in if you don't want to have a circle, like a middle of the flower. You can just weave your, we've got a housefly in here. You might hear it buzzing around, but you can just weave your fibers through the existing, through the now existing, threads of those petals, and you will fill in the middle of that flower. And then if you wanted to put some beads or something on top to define a center, or maybe you don't want a center, it's sewing you do, but that's how you do a flower. Moving on then from a flower, if you wanted to fill in the center of that flower with a circle, you can see that easily you take that circle and it can go into a rectangle as well. And basically what this looks like when you're stitching is you start on one side of that circle, then you go over like 180 degrees to the other side. You do the back stitch to fill in one side, circles don't have sides, but one half of that circle, and then the other half of the circle is the other, back stitch. You kind of have your end points, and then you just fill in the rest, and that gives you a nice look to your circle. Moving on then to an oval. You can take an oval, and kind of apply the same concept that I just showed you for the circle. A oval. I'm getting all my words. I'm so excited. I'm getting all my words mumble jumbled. But a oval then is fairly similar to a circle, and it can go into that rectangle for the same sort of concept. Now moving on, let's do something like a heart. Now a heart is unique because it has, it doesn't stop and start at the same place. So you can see as you take the heart and you morph it into a rectangle, you are able to fill in, like if you start at the bottom of the heart, for example, it doesn't matter, but let's just start at the bottom of the heart and work our way up. You're able just to fill in like one half of the side of the top of the heart. The other side though is a separate rectangle. So we can kind of call like the body of the heart like rectangle number 1. 1A would be the top left in this case, and then the second rectangle would be the top right. And how you fill it in, the order does not matter. But that's the concept behind it. Then moving on to vines. Vines, like for example in Audrey's cutwork garden dress, you could definitely, I did cutwork for it, but you could definitely do shadow embroidery. I'm so excited to get the words out for this video. Shadow embroidery, and that would just be, you can see how the vine easily goes into a rectangle. Any sort of shape like this, you have like a swoop or something, it easily goes into a rectangle. You use those long edges, those long sides to fill in your coverage, and then you just back stitch the short edges, and now you have your whole shape filled in. We can move on to like a trapezoid, and let's sort of imagine this butterfly. The wings are like a misshapen trapezoid, if you will, and you can see how the butterfly's wings go into a rectangle quite easily, and then you're able to do again your coverage on the long side, and then just backstitch to get the rest of the outline of that butterfly. The butterfly's wings. How exciting is this? Finally, some things are kind of already set up for you. For example, like a triangle. You can see we can take this triangle and pull it apart to have a rectangle, but really those edges were already set up for you. So you can pull it apart and in your mind, if that is helpful, and apply this same sort of finding the rectangle concept, but those edges were already, I mean, they're not parallel, they were already set up for you to go back and forth, back and forth. Does that make sense? So, if we take all of this now and apply it to something that is like a bow, which how many shadow smock bows? I know, there's been a ton of them. A ton of shadow smock bows. And we can literally pull this bow apart and apply the same sort of idea to it. And so if we pull the bow apart and not pull my hair, you can see how the bow has these rectangles built into it. The center of the bow, it becomes an oval, which we just talked about, and then the loops of the bow and the tails of the bow, yeah, those are going to be rectangles too, and you can pull them apart and then they fill themselves in. So, super exciting to share this with y'all. I've been meaning to put this into a video for a while, but I had to dip my toe into graphic animation, which I know, like I said, it's very kindergartenish, my results, but I hope it is helpful and exciting. I love shadow work embroidery. I have other videos that major antique shadow work embroidery, and I've got other embroidery videos if you're interested. But yeah, shadow work embroidery I think is so beautiful. If you have any questions, put them down in the comments below and I will do my best to answer them. And as always, I appreciate y'all for watching, and I hope to catch y'all next time.